A waiter made snide remarks about a customer's outfit, mocked him right at the table, then froze when the manager announced that same man had just bought the restaurant. It was a Thursday. Warm air, clear sky, and just enough breeze to keep the sun from being too bold. Darnell Kennedy didn't need much that day. Just a seat, a fork, and a bit of peace. No suit, no flash. Just jeans, an old Marlin sweatshirt, and sneakers that had seen better days. He parked his grey Subaru at the edge of the lot, not bothering to use the valet stand in front of La Marina. He liked keeping things low-key. Always had. Even now, with several properties under his belt and a reputation that stretched quietly across parts of Dallas and Tulsa, Darnell never found the need to walk around like a man who needed to be noticed. Inside, the bistro looked exactly as he remembered. Sleek, black tables, soft amber lighting, big open windows looking out to the street. It wasn't crowded, just 4 or 5 tables filled. The kind of place where voices stayed low and the servers stood straight. He stood for a moment by the host stand, looking around. That's when Trevor clocked him. Trevor Delaney Langley was leaning against the bar, arms crossed, chatting with a younger waitress who laughed at everything he said, even when it wasn't funny. He saw Darnell, paused, and smirked. "Help you with something?" Trevor called out, still leaning, still smiling like he knew exactly what kind of man Darnell was. Before Darnell had even opened his mouth. "Just looking to have lunch," Darnell said evenly. Trevor finally walked over. No sir, no welcome, no warmth. Just grabbed a menu and turned, expecting Darnell to follow without a word. "Bar's open," Trevor muttered, gesturing like he was doing a favor. "But I guess I can seat you in the back." Darnell didn't respond. He just walked behind him. They passed 2 booths and ended up at a small 2-top next to a framed painting of Lake Eufaula. Darnell pulled out his own chair and sat. Trevor dropped the menu on the table like he was swatting a fly. "Water?" he asked. "Sparkling, if you've got it." Trevor raised an eyebrow. "All right, big spender." Darnell looked up at him, not angry, not smiling either. "Be right back," Trevor added, spinning around and walking off without waiting for a thank you. From a nearby booth, a woman in a floral blazer looked over and caught Darnell's eye. She gave the smallest shake of her head, like she'd seen this sort of thing before. Darnell gave her a short nod back, then leaned back in his seat. It wasn't new. Not to him. Walk in dressed like any other middle-aged guy on a casual day off, and some people start calculating your worth based on what they see, especially in a place like this. He didn't come to make a scene. He came to see what was really happening inside this place when no one thought they were being watched. He'd bought into La Marina 2 weeks ago. Off-market deal, all quiet. The paperwork had barely settled, and none of the staff had been told who their new silent partner was. Silent didn't mean invisible. Trevor came back with a bottle, 2 inches of sparkling water sloshing at the bottom of the glass like it had been poured out of spite. "You ready to order, or still studying the menu?" he asked. Darnell didn't even glance at it. "Grilled salmon, broccolini, no sauce." Trevor scribbled it down with a sigh. "All right then." And just as he turned, Trevor muttered something under his breath, loud enough for Darnell to catch. "Didn't know we were doing lunch service at Foot Locker." Darnell didn't move, didn't react, just exhaled slowly and looked out the window. He wasn't here for Trevor. He was here for something bigger. But that didn't mean Trevor wouldn't be part of the lesson. Trevor liked to talk, especially when he thought the people listening would laugh just enough to make him feel clever. Back in the kitchen, leaning against the counter by the espresso machine, he wiped his hands on his apron and said just loud enough for 2 line cooks and the hostess to hear, "Got a table 3 trying to order like he's got a platinum card." Dressed like he wandered in from the bus stop, he grinned, waiting for someone to laugh. The younger cook, Luis, looked up from the grill, but didn't say a word. He just raised an eyebrow and kept flipping chicken. The hostess, Miranda, gave a forced smile and walked away. Trevor didn't catch the silence. Or maybe he did, but didn't care. "I mean, come on," Trevor added, scoffing. "It's La Marina, not some food court." Back in the dining room, Darnell sat quietly, phone on the table, face relaxed. He wasn't texting, wasn't scrolling. He was watching, listening, picking up on who checked on their tables and who didn't, which servers refilled glasses without being asked, how the host greeted walk-ins. When his plate finally came out, it wasn't Trevor who brought it. It was Miranda. "Grilled salmon, broccolini, no sauce," she said, placing it gently in front of him. "Thank you," Darnell said, his voice calm but warm. She looked him in the eye. "If you need anything, I'll be right over there." He nodded. She walked away. But Trevor couldn't help himself. He returned 2 minutes later, standing at the edge of the table with a smirk. "Everything all right, boss?" "Fine," Darnell replied without looking up. "You know, not everyone comes in here knowing what broccolini is. Good choice, though. Pairs well with the house Chardonnay, if you're into that kind of thing." It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. Like Darnell was trying too hard to belong. "I'm good with water," Darnell said plainly. Across the room, the couple by the window exchanged a glance. They weren't trying to be obvious, but they'd been watching since Darnell sat down. "You always like that?" the man asked quietly. "Worse when the manager isn't around," his wife whispered back. Trevor leaned in slightly. "Hey, just letting you know. If you're planning to pay cash, we've had some issues with counterfeit bills. So management's asking folks to use cards if they can." Darnell finally looked up. "You telling that to every table?" he asked, voice still calm. Trevor blinked. "I mean, just a heads up, you know how it is." "No," Darnell replied. "Explain it to me." Trevor laughed awkwardly, then backed off. "Forget it, man. Just trying to help." As he walked away, Darnell caught the reflection of Miranda watching from behind the bar. Her lips were pressed tight. She looked like she wanted to say something but didn't. Darnell took a slow bite of salmon and chewed thoughtfully. The food was good. The service, clearly, needed work. But this wasn't new to him. He'd been in places like this his whole life. Places where your value was measured by your shoes, your watch, your skin tone, or the way you pronounced menu. That was the real reason he bought into La Marina. Not because it was profitable, though it was. Not because it had a loyal base, though it did. But because places like this could either set the tone for inclusion or keep pushing the wrong people out. He was tired of watching from the outside. Behind the kitchen door, Miranda pulled Carlos, the manager, aside. "Hey, just giving you a heads up. Table 3? Trevor's been real snide with him." Carlos frowned. "How bad?" "Bad enough, I'm telling you," she said. "He made a joke about his shoes, and something about counterfeit bills." Carlos let out a breath through his nose. "All right. Thanks." He glanced through the kitchen window just as Trevor sauntered by with 2 glasses of wine for another table, smiling like nothing had happened. Carlos made a note to check the schedule, but Darnell was about to make a bigger impression than anyone expected. Darnell wasn't the kind of man who needed to raise his voice to be heard. He'd spent the better part of 2 decades navigating boardrooms where the loudest person in the room rarely knew the most. He knew how power moved, quietly, under the surface, measured and precise. He finished his lunch slowly, savoring each bite, not because he was hungry, but because it gave him more time to observe. Every detail mattered. How long it took to clear a plate, whether napkins were folded or tossed, whether the bartender washed his hands after handling cash. These weren't just habits. They were signs of a place's health. And right now, La Marina had a fever. Trevor made another round near the table, this time without stopping. Just passed by with a smirk and a muttered, "Glad you're enjoying yourself." That time, Darnell didn't respond at all. He let Trevor walk, let the silence hang like fog. Trevor didn't like it. He was used to getting a reaction, even if it was irritation or eye-rolling. But when a man doesn't flinch, it messes with your sense of control. At the far end of the restaurant, Carlos stepped out from the back, clipboard in hand, polo shirt tucked in, hair slicked back. He was young, late 30s maybe. but sharp. The kind of manager who remembered regulars' names and didn't mind bussing a table if the staff was stretched thin. He made a quiet path through the room, stopping by a table or two, checking in like he always did. When he reached Darnell's table, he smiled. "Everything all right, sir?" he asked, tone professional. Darnell looked up, met his eyes, then offered a firm but polite smile. "The salmon's excellent. Compliments to the kitchen." Carlos nodded. "Glad to hear it. Anything else I can do for you?" There was a pause. Just half a second too long. "No," Darnell said, still polite. "I'll be settling the check shortly." Carlos didn't push. He gave a small nod and turned away. As he walked off, Miranda caught up to him and whispered something. Carlos stopped mid-step and glanced back toward Darnell's table. His brow tightened slightly. Then he kept moving, right back to the kitchen. At the bar, Trevor was joking with the same young waitress from earlier, his voice just loud enough to carry. "Dude ordered like he owns the place," he said, shaking his head. "Acting all composed? Bro, you're eating fish in a hoodie." Miranda, stacking glasses nearby, shot him a look. "You really don't know who that is, do you?" Trevor laughed. "Who, him?" "Please. Some guy with money he found under a couch." She leaned in closer, her voice low. "You should stop talking before you find out the hard way." But Trevor just smirked and rolled his eyes. "Relax. You sound like HR." Back at the table, Darnell pulled out his wallet and placed a black metal card on top of the check. Miranda came over to collect it, careful and quiet. "Thank you again for lunch," he said. "And for treating me like a guest?" Her eyes flicked up, surprised, but grateful. "You're welcome." Carlos stepped out again, checking something on his phone. Darnell stood and walked toward him, slowly, deliberately. Not in a rush, not trying to cause a scene. "Carlos," he said calmly, extending his hand. Carlos turned, shook it. "Yes, sir." "I'd like to speak to you and your staff briefly," Darnell said. "If now's not a bad time." Carlos blinked. "You're, sure. Let me gather them." He looked confused, not alarmed, just caught off guard. But Darnell's tone made it clear this wasn't a request. Trevor watched the exchange from the bar, finally sensing something had shifted. Miranda walked past and whispered, "Might want to lose the attitude." "That's the new partner," Trevor laughed. "What?" She didn't repeat herself, but the look on her face told him everything he needed to know. The hum of the kitchen had changed. Pans still sizzled, tickets still printed. But the energy? It was different. You could feel it in the way people moved, quicker, more alert, as if something had crept under the floor and was rattling the tiles loose. Carlos slipped back into the kitchen and clapped his hands twice. "Everybody!" he called out, eyes moving across the staff. "Front of house, back of house, quick meeting, right now. Please." Trevor leaned against the prep table, arms folded like this was some team huddle before service. He was still smirking, but it was thinner now, less confident, like the room had turned on him and he was just starting to notice. Luis wiped his hands on a towel and nodded. Miranda already knew what was coming. She didn't say anything, just stepped away from the drink station and headed out to the dining room with Carlos. In the front, Darnell stood near the host stand, hands in his pockets, calm as ever. A few customers lingered at their tables, eyes curious but polite. Most had the good sense to stay quiet. They could feel something building. Carlos stepped forward first. "Everyone, just a moment of your time. I want to introduce someone very important to this team." Darnell took a step forward, then looked around the room. His voice was low, steady, measured. "My name is Darnell Kennedy. 2 weeks ago I became the majority partner in this restaurant." Silence. Trevor blinked twice, looked over at Miranda, then back at Carlos, like his brain was trying to catch up to what he just heard. Darnell continued, "I didn't come here to make a scene. I came to observe, quietly, just to see how things run when no one thinks they're being watched." He paused and looked directly at Trevor. Unfortunately, I saw more than I hoped I would. Trevor opened his mouth. Maybe to explain. Maybe to deflect. But Darnell raised a hand. Not angrily, just enough to make it clear he wasn't done speaking. I watched a man speak to a customer like they didn't belong. I heard jokes that weren't jokes. I saw people being judged based on absolutely nothing that matters. He turned slightly, addressing the whole group now. I want to be very clear. What I experienced today, while isolated to one person, is not just a bad habit. It's a warning sign. A small fire that can burn down a good house if no one puts it out. No one moved. Not a word. Darnell looked back at Trevor. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., you'll be here. Not to work the floor, but to sit down with me and Carlos and explain in full what made you feel comfortable behaving the way you did today. Trevor swallowed hard. Look, man, Mr. Kennedy, I didn't mean anything. That's the thing, Darnell cut in, still composed. You didn't have to mean anything. You were loud enough that a couple at another table complained. You were careless enough that your own co-workers had to intervene. You embarrassed this restaurant. Carlos stepped up now, his voice low. We don't tolerate that kind of treatment toward any guest. And certainly not an owner. Trevor's smirk was gone. Now he just looked pale, like someone had pulled the floor out from under him. Miranda folded her arms and looked away. Darnell gave the group one last glance. This place has potential, but it only grows if the people inside protect its values. I'm not interested in fake smiles or corporate statements. I want respect. For the food, for the customers, and most of all, for each other. He turned to Carlos. I'll see you in the morning. Then, without another word, he walked out. But what Darnell left behind would echo longer than any speech. Trevor didn't sleep much that night. His mind kept replaying everything. His jokes, the way he tossed that menu, the smug little comments he made like he was king of a place he barely understood. He kept thinking about the card Darnell handed over, about how Miranda's eyes shifted when she said, "That's the new partner." And now, 7:58 a.m., he sat in the back office of La Marina, a room he'd never been in before, with his leg bouncing and palms sweating, waiting for a conversation he knew he couldn't talk his way out of. Carlos walked in first, holding a notepad and a copy of the employee handbook. He didn't sit right away, just placed both on the table and leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Morning," he said flatly. Trevor muttered, "Yeah." Then the door opened again, and Darnell stepped in. Same casual energy, same steady walk. But this time, Trevor saw him differently. He wasn't the guy in the hoodie. He was the guy with the keys. "Let's keep this simple," Darnell said, pulling out a chair and sitting across from him. "You know why we're here?" Trevor nodded. "Yeah, good. Then let's not waste time." He leaned forward slightly. "Explain it to me." Trevor hesitated. I didn't mean to offend anybody. I thought I was just joking around. You seemed cool, like the type of guy who wouldn't take it the wrong way." Darnell raised an eyebrow. "The type of guy?" Trevor stammered. "I mean, I wasn't serious. I say stuff like that to other customers too sometimes. Just messing around, not personal." "That's your defense? You offend everyone, so it's fine?" Carlos stepped forward now. "Trevor, do you understand what this job actually is?" Trevor looked between them. "I mean, I serve tables. I make sure guests are taken care of." "Guests," Carlos repeated. "Not just the ones who wear suits. Not just the ones who tip big. All of them." Darnell added, "Your job is to create an environment where people feel welcome. That's it. Doesn't matter if they walk in wearing loafers or slides." Trevor dropped his eyes. "I messed up." "You didn't mess up," Darnell said. "You revealed something." He let that sit. "Look," Trevor said, leaning forward now, trying to salvage something. "I know how I came off. And yeah, I was out of pocket. But I don't hate anybody. I was being dumb. I get that. Words matter," Carlos said firmly. "Tone matters. How you made people feel. That matters. Trevor looked at them, more vulnerable than he'd ever looked on the floor. So what happens now? Darnell tapped a finger on the desk. Then he leaned back. I'm not firing you, he said. Not yet. Trevor blinked. You're not? I'm giving you one chance. Just one. You're going to do a full-day retraining. You're going to listen to every server on staff, especially the ones you've ignored. You're going to learn why what you said was wrong. Not because I said so, but because they felt it. Carlos added, You'll shadow Miranda and Luis this weekend, quietly, respectfully. If I hear one more sideways comment, one more joke at a guest's expense, you're done. Trevor nodded slowly. Okay, I understand. Darnell stood. Good, because I don't do second warnings. He walked to the door, then paused. You were right about one thing yesterday, he said over his shoulder. I do own this place. Then he opened the door and left. Carlos looked at Trevor, silent for a moment. You better mean what you said in here, he warned. Because a lot of people are watching now, but not everyone was watching to see him fail. Some were waiting to see if he'd actually grow. By lunch rush the next day, the staff knew. Word had spread quietly, but thoroughly. Not in whispers, not in gossip, but in glances, in how people carried themselves when Trevor walked by. Miranda didn't say much. She didn't have to. When Trevor approached her just before his shift, shadowing her, she gave a simple nod and said, Stay close, keep quiet, and pay attention. It wasn't cold. It was firm. Trevor followed. He held the tray when she asked. He cleared tables when she pointed. No jokes, no side comments, no slouching. For the first time since he'd started working at La Marina, he moved like someone who realized the place didn't revolve around him. By 2 p.m., the kitchen was humming again, orders moving, guests chatting softly, cutlery clinking. Darnell sat in a corner booth, laptop open, pretending to check spreadsheets. But really, he was watching. Quietly. Just as he had the first time, only now, people knew who he was. He watched Trevor refill a water glass without being asked. Watched him listen when Luis gave a quiet correction about how he held the tray. He saw something different in Trevor's posture. Not fear. Something closer to discomfort. The kind that makes you rethink who you've been. During a short break, Trevor stepped outside and leaned against the wall. He wasn't checking his phone. He wasn't smoking. He was just standing there, processing. Miranda stepped out after him. She sipped a soda, then leaned beside him. Hard day? She asked. He let out a breath. Feels like everyone's staring through me. They probably are, she said plainly. Trevor nodded slowly. I was a jerk. Yep. He glanced over, waiting for more. But Miranda wasn't going to coddle him. That wasn't her job. I didn't realize how much people hated working around me, he said. I thought I was just messing around. I never meant to, he trailed off. Miranda took another sip, then said, You made people feel small. Doesn't really matter what you meant. What matters is that you didn't notice. Or worse, didn't care. Until someone with power called you on it. Trevor stared at the ground. I don't know if I can fix it. You can try, she said. But don't expect applause. Inside, Darnell closed his laptop. He didn't need to watch anymore. What he came to see had already happened. He stood and made his way to the kitchen. Carlos met him by the pass. Better today, Carlos said, keeping his voice low. I saw, Darnell replied. He's got a long way to go. They always do, Darnell said. The point isn't perfection. It's whether or not he keeps showing up differently. Carlos nodded. Think he will? We'll find out. Before leaving, Darnell walked back to the table where that same couple from 2 days ago was now seated again. The man looked up, recognizing him immediately. Hey, you're the... Darnell held up a hand, smiling. Just a customer today. The woman smiled back. Place feels different. Shouldn't take someone like me walking in for that to happen, he said. But sometimes it does. They exchanged a nod of mutual respect, not about money or ownership or status, just understanding. Outside, Trevor stepped back into the restaurant. No dramatics, no speeches, just a quiet breath and a second chance. But what mattered now was what he'd do with it. The following week, things started settling back into rhythm, but it wasn't the same rhythm as before. There was something different in how the servers moved now, more alert, more respectful, but not because they were scared, because they had seen the consequences of treating someone like a background character in a room where they didn't expect power to sit. Trevor showed up early every day that week, not to kiss up. He didn't bring coffee for everyone or try to win people over with compliments. Instead, he kept his head down and did the work. Every part of it. He asked Luis how to reset a wine glass properly. He asked Miranda how she handled guests who were rude without stooping to their level. And when a young black couple walked in during Saturday dinner service, dressed casually like Darnell had been that first day, Trevor didn't blink. He offered them a menu with the same tone he used for everyone else. Maybe gentler, maybe more careful. He wasn't perfect. He still said the wrong thing now and then. Still had to check his sarcasm before it slipped out. But he was learning how to listen instead of assuming everyone shared his sense of humor. And Darnell? He didn't come in often. Just once, that Friday night, sitting near the back with a friend from out of town. The friend looked around the room, impressed, and said, "You own this place?" Darnell smiled. "Part of it. I thought you'd have your face on the wall or something." "That's not why I do it." "Then why?" Darnell looked around, at Miranda clearing plates with care, at Trevor quietly offering a refill to a table, at Carlos coaching a new hostess near the entryway, because some people only respect what they think they can see. And I'd rather build something real than just put on a show. The friend nodded slowly. Bet they didn't expect you. That's the point. They clinked glasses. Not to money, not to revenge, but to the kind of change that doesn't come with fireworks, but sticks. The lesson wasn't complicated. Respect shouldn't depend on appearances. Decency isn't earned through a credit card or a title. Dignity doesn't need to announce itself. It just waits. Quiet, patient, steady. And when the moment comes, it stands tall, not to shame, but to reveal what's been there all along. So next time you're tempted to judge someone based on their shoes, their clothes, their silence, think about what you don't see. Because the one person you overlook might be the one holding the door to your future. And that door opens both ways. If this story gave you something to think about, share it with someone who needs the reminder. And don't forget to subscribe. We've got more real stories coming that speak truth without preaching. Just life the way it really is.